peace deal with Russia? Well, joining you now is Erol Morkoc, Republican strategist and spokesperson for Republicans overseas. So, Erol, thanks for taking the time. Donald Trump then claims to have given Ukraine significant security guarantees, considered giving air support. Obviously, many in the Republican camp are against significant support, financial or in terms of military. How do you think this will go down? Morning.
Oh, well, good morning, and thank you for having me. And I think it's going to go down, in a contentious way as the entire process from the war to how it's been handled to the response from everybody has been viewed contentiously, right? I mean, there's a lot of naysayers on all sides, but the fact of the matter is there is a proposed, nearly $100 billion European financed arm package for Ukraine. And that's showing a commitment without endlessly draining the U.S. taxpayers. Just because President Trump said he's not going to put U.S. soldiers on the ground, I mean, that's you have to play to, the people at home, but also realize you are a world leader, and a world leader who has the capacity that the Americans do has to play a role. So have that role be done intelligently. Let Europe rise up in its capacity now, especially with the guarantees, and it looks like the serious inclinations they've taken financially towards NATO. Let us back them with weaponry and integration and potentially with air support, and especially with airplanes in regard to the Ukrainians. And let that be the impetus for a European and British-led coalition there with the Americans in a supporting role, in a very strong supporting role. I think that's what the people back home, the people who voted for him, are going to be okay with. They don't have a problem so much with the money going there if the money's being used wisely and they don't feel like it's being fleeced. And they also don't have a problem with Europe taking a lead and us backing them up. They dislike the situation where they felt like they were getting taken advantage of, and they also felt like Europe was buying Russian oil and then expecting American security guarantees for the situation. If we can reverse that, I think Donald Trump can win domestically at home and also win a strategic victory for Ukraine, which is ultimately the goal here, a strategic victory for Ukraine. And I hope we keep that in sight.
What have you made of Donald Trump's actions, comments, performance, if you will, over the last week or so, starting with the meeting with Mr. Putin in Alaska and then, of course, the summit at the White House?
I think it's important to see how much Donald Trump is committed to peace. And I think one thing that's important, to highlight, especially for anybody viewing this, is the Americans have oftentimes pushed forward this narrative that meeting with them, with the President of the United States, is such an honor that you need to concede everything before we'll even give you a meeting. President Biden famously did not, I believe, meet with President Putin. And so the fact that we, quote unquote, rolled out the red carpet and were friendly and cordial and sat down, and yes, we didn't get that peace agreement, but the ceasefire that we'd hoped. You can castigate those. Not saying that you have, but one can castigate these things as like empty situations. But it's taken the conversations forward, and that came with all the European leaders getting on that airplane and flying over and sitting there and talking to the president and showing that commitment. And you see that resolve and that growing. And at least we broke the ice for detente. I think in America, for example, we're still technically at war with North Korea. We only signed an armistice, but what we did do was stop the killing. Now, do we hope or expect that outcome in Ukraine? No, but the point is, no death is better than any death, and right now that's the president's focus. I think the Europeans are on board with that. So now we just need to get Vladimir Putin, the only terrible actor in this scenario, to get on board with that.
And there was some criticism, I think, of the President Trump, following his meeting with Vladimir Putin, maybe suggesting he seemed a bit downbeat following the talks. The meeting was cut short. There wasn't the progress. Do you think that he felt that could have gone better?
I think he definitely was in the most American way, very optimistic for a ceasefire, and it probably was very clear to him immediately that wasn't going to be the way that was going to go. I think that perhaps the media played a little bit too much out of the press conference after. They expected Trump to kind of come out and do his bombastic thing. In this situation, he was happy to let Putin, as the guest, speak first. He didn't give too long of remarks, and then he immediately got into work mode and said, now we're going to get to the next part of this discussion. And so I think that's the focus and takeaway. Yes, optically, if we're playing some game of social chess, maybe maybe it's a downer that we didn't get a bombastic Trump interview, or is that the fact that he can turn on statescraft for different leaders than he uses for somebody like Cyril Ramaphosa when he brings him to the White House and puts on the video and puts him on the spot? It's a different type of leader, different kind of situation. Trump is very adaptable, very fluid. He does the weave, as he says, and maybe he does it in life too. So.
And I suspect weave's very important to Mr. Trump in all sorts of ways. But just finally, his relationship with Zelensky seemed much more positive than their first meeting, of course, in February, which was a farce, and I felt really sort of quite appalling the way that Mr. Zelensky was treated. Do you think that Donald Trump does actually have the interests of Ukraine at heart, or as some have suggested, is this just more of he's a very transactional man, isn't he? More of a deal to open up the economic prospects with Russia, and for that reason playing more by Mr. Putin's tune?
I think he's a transactional man, but it's not to be understated that he's a theatrical man. He's a man and he understands the value of a camera. He understands very much set design, stagecraft, and what he's doing. And so he'll bring in people, and Elon will do this too. When you have this type of power, whether it be financial or, in Donald Trump's case, sort of the power of the presidency, you can quote unquote bust it up with people in ways that other people can't do that. And you can turn levers on and off and on and off. And while that Machiavellian behavior might turn people off in a social sense, it is actually quite effective in getting the results you want. And Donald Trump also came in, I think, with very little confidence that Joe Biden had made any overtures towards peace. And he had very little confidence in the prior administration. So there was some backtracking. I think that the way that Zelensky carried himself this time also was a little bit better. He read the room a little bit better. Not to say put all the blame on President Zelensky last time, but I mean, there's ways you can work with President Trump and flatter him, and if that's what you need to do, especially in certain situations, you noticed he said thank you immediately, multiple times, and he also talked to that reporter about the suit, and they had a sort of everybody in the room kind of made up. Is the point I'm getting at? Because in the end, they're our allies, they're our friends. And yeah, perhaps we press them, and perhaps Donald Trump uses the media and does it in public, and that can be uncouth. But in the end, if it brings about peace, Donald Trump's avant-garde strategy has worked before. So let's keep at least believing in him, at least if you love peace.
Absolutely right. Thank you so much, Errol, for joining us. That was Erol Morkoc, Republican strategist and spokesperson for Republicans Overseas UK. I'm Richard